Alright, it's time to get down to the Badlands for the showdown with more cards for the newest set of Hearthstone to be revealed and reviewed by me. This is going to be covering the Druid, Hunter, and Warlock cards. Now, all of the Hunter cards haven't been revealed, but we are still going to be covering the ones that have been revealed so far. All right, let's start with the Druid cards with a package that I think no one expected, aka Dragon Druid. The first one is going to be Fae, the Setting Sun, a 9-cost 4-attack dragon with 12 HP, Rush, Lifesteal, Taunt, costs 1 less for each dragon you've summoned this game. Keyword summoned, not played, summoned. Some of the next cards are going to be even better in combination with this, but Tapior from Castle Nathria finally has a big payoff of why you want to summon all those tokens. And because that card can get out of control really quickly, you should be able to discount this to almost 0 very consistently. Though you are going to probably want to try to find ways to find additional copies of this, such as Amalgamator of the Deep, or any other random discoverability tools that you might have for dragons. But speaking of dragons, the next one is going to be Dragon Golem, a 7-cost 3-attack 4 HP dragon with Taunt, Battlecry. Summon a copy of this for each dragon in your hand. Remind you of anything? If you've been playing since Dark Moon Fair, you know there was a corrupt card that allowed you to slam down an entire board of 4/4s that were rarely 4/4s because you had Survival Instinct. However, now you don't really have Survival Instinct, so you can't get as big of minions. But you do have things like Lothamar in order to buff this up to a 6/8 board full of minions if you do have a bunch of dragons in your hand. You also have things like Ajaran Gardens in order to buff them up. There's a lot of ways to consistently buff this up, though the cost might be the one thing that will be holding it back in the long run. Let's get onto the next card, which is going to be Spinetail Drake, a 4-cost 5-attack 4 HP dragon. Battlecry, if you're holding a dragon, deal 5 damage to an enemy minion. Probably the weakest out of the entire bunch of these cards, at least the dragon package. There are just better things you would want to do instead, at least in Druid. It does add a body to both of the previous cards for the dragon synergy, which might be the only reason why you would want to run something like this. Now for the next card, which is Splish Splash Whelp, a 2-cost 2-attack 1 HP dragon. Battlecry, if you're holding a dragon, gain an empty mana crystal. Mana Cheat is always incredibly strong. This is an early game minion for the Dragon Druid deck, which is something that it kind of was missing. And because we do have a lot of other ramp tools, I honestly can't see a world where this one doesn't see play, because that deck has honestly been missing some type of mana ramp onto mana, and this is the perfect way to just consistently ramp up. And now for the next card, which is Cactus Construct, a 1-cost nature spell. Discover a 2-cost minion, summon a 1/2 copy of it. Now, out of these 5 cards, it's the only one that doesn't actually have a package within itself, and honestly is probably the weakest out of the entire bunch. Alright, fresh off the presses, the final Druid cards. The first one is going to be Take to the Skies, a 3-cost spell that draws 2 dragons, give them +1/+1. This feeds into Dragon Golem actually incredibly well. Also feeds into the 9-cost dragon that discounts itself for each individual dragon you slam down. Overall, being able to draw 2 dragons is pretty good, especially even if you're not running a large number of dragons within your deck. You could in theory use this with the 2-cost Whelp to draw both copies of that, and then maybe 1 additional dragon such as Tapior or whatever, just so you could ramp up really quickly. This is a pretty decent card. If Dragon Druid is going to be a fully functional deck, this is the perfect card for it. The next card is going to be Dragon Tales, a 2-cost spell that choose 1, get 2 random dragons that cost 5 or less, or get 2 that cost 5 or more. I think the pool of 2 or lower dragons is probably a lot more consistent than the pool of 5 or higher dragons. However, it really just depends on how you're going to want to use this. I think using it for the 2 lower cost dragons early on would be better, and it is incredibly flexible between a late game card or an early game card. And while random RNG isn't always the best in the world, I do think this will probably see a little bit of play, just because this does add additional bodies to Dragon Golem that you need a lot of dragons in your hand in order to get full advantage off. And the next card is going to be Rehydrate, since we already saw Dehydrate, a 2-cost nature spell that restores 7 HP. Quickdraw, refresh 2 mana crystals. Why do you keep printing cards like this? The only benefit about this card is the fact that it will only get the refresh 2 mana crystals effect if it is a Quickdraw, which means unless Druid has a lot of ways to draw through their deck, you're not most likely going to be able to get it for free. Oh wait, no, Druid does have a lot of ways to draw through their deck, so they'll probably find out ways to discount this down to 0 and then just slam this down. If Yogg was still the version that he was previously, where he was discounted for each individual spell that you casted in a game, this card would be incredibly playable. But honestly, you know, more that I think about it, I think this card is decent, but probably won't see too much play. All right, now for the next card, which is going to be Desert Nest Martin, a 4-cost 3-attack 5 HP dragon. Taunt, Battlecry if you're holding a dragon, refresh 4 mana crystals. So, which essentially makes this minion a free minion whenever you do have an additional dragon within your hand, which isn't the worst thing in the world. We also do know there are a few cards that will be able to buff up dragons within your hand, or even just minions in your hand. And we might actually see Ajarian Gardens see some play, because there's a lot of different dragons that are getting a lot of advantage off of being able to be spammed out for free or for lower mana than you'd normally be able to play them at. It's a decent minion, probably will see some play in Dragon Druid if you're not going to go down the route where you're only running a few key dragons for the very first card that we went over today. And for the Highlander card of Druid is Rheastrasza, a 8-cost 8-attack 8 HP dragon. Battlecry if your deck has no duplicates, summon the Purified Dragon Nest, and then the Dragon Nest at the start of your turn, discover a dragon. It costs 4 less. First of all, this is one of the characters that I expected to see in a Badlands set. This is the dragon behind Rathian's Purification, which is the reference in the Purified Dragon Nest, which is really cool. I might actually even do a lore short on this character now that I'm looking at it, since I haven't done one of those in quite a long time. Overall, sure, you're not going to be able to be as consistent as previously with a lot of the other dragon support within this set. However, because of the fact that you are going to be discovering a dragon at the start of each of your individual turns, this card probably will see a lot of play. Highlander Druid is actually looking to shape up to be pretty decent, just because you have a lot of ways to randomly generate a bunch of additional dragons, or even draw into the key dragons that you really need early on. The only downside about this card in particular is the fact that Druid is only really getting one deck supported in this entire set. Sure, you have 2 cards that are basically dead, but it should be fun. I like Highlander decks, and there should be a lot of fun with this. It's a new type of Druid deck that hasn't really existed before. Popguard the Putrid is a 4-cost 2-attack 6 HP minion for Warlock. That makes your fell spells cost 1 less and half lifesteal. Battlecry, get 2 Barrels of Sludge. Barrel of Sludge is going to be a card that we've seen previously in this set. That does 3 damage to the lowest HP minion whenever it's played, discarded, or destroyed, which we will be seeing a lot of later on with some of the other cards. The other good targets for this card in particular is Crescendo, just because this will allow you to heal and do damage to your opponent's face and board, thus making a Fell Fatigue Warlock deck possible. Fiendish Circle will actually also play into the Fatigue Fell Warlock idea, where you're going to slam down a bunch of imps in order to draw through the majority of your deck so you can OTK your opponent. Honestly, this is a really powerful card for 4 mana, and because of how powerful it is, I can't see a world where it doesn't see play, even if we don't get any more Fell support. So let's get on to the next card, which is going to be Sludge on Wheels, a 3-cost 1-attack 5 HP minion with Rush. Whenever this takes damage, get a Barrel of Sludge, add 1 to the bottom of your deck, and then the Barrel of Sludge is another Fell spell that we've went over already a few times before. Now, interesting enough, if you slam this down on the same turn that you used Defile to wipe out the entire board, you could, in theory, get 5 barrels at the bottom of the deck, which doesn't sound that good at first glance. But given some of the other cards that have also been revealed so far, this card is probably going to be incredibly powerful. Now let's get on to the next card. Fracking, a 1-cost spell that look at the bottom 3 cards of your deck. draw one, destroy the others. This is how you're going to be destroying the barrels that you're going to slam down to the bottom of the deck. Sure, you're not going to always be able to hit your opponent's face with them, but they could easily act as removal tools. This also allows you to basically dredge one card from the bottom of the deck if there is a key card that you really want access to, and because we are going to be seeing more cards that actually get benefits from destroying them in Warlock, then this card is probably incredibly playable. Now for the next card, Furnace Fuel, a 4-cost fire spell. Whenever this is played, discard it or destroy, draw 2 cards. This is the perfect card that we needed for Discard Warlock in particular. However, because this can easily be played in a Destroy Warlock that we've been seeing a lot of support for, this card is probably incredibly playable. 99% of the time, you're probably not going to want to straight up play this card because it is a higher cost card to draw just 2 cards. But if you do have a consistent way to either discard it or destroy it, it is very strong. Let's get on to the next card, which would play into this pretty well. Waste Remover is a 4-cost 7/7 demon. At the end of your turn, destroy the bottom 3 cards of your deck, which instantly triggers any barrel of sludge that you put at the bottom of the deck, or even the previous card if it somehow is at the bottom. This will allow you to have a 7/7 on turn 4, which is something that Warlock already has access to. However, this actually gets to attack, unlike the previous 7/7 on turn 4 that we had access for Warlock. The only trade-off that you're going to make is the fact that it's destroying cards from your deck instead of having no attack and having taunt. Now let's get onto the next card, which is going to be Disposal Assistant. 2 cost, 3 attack, 2 HP minion. Battlecry and Death Rattle put a barrel of sludge on the bottom of your deck. This plays into all the previous cards that destroy the bottom of the deck. If you have additional ways to discard one of these barrels of sludges, is really good too, but even if you play it out, this is actually not a bad card for 2 mana, just because it will always be able to snipe whatever you need to snipe. But this isn't going to be the only package that we're going to be seeing in Warlock. The other one is going to be Excavate, aka Tram, Conductor, Gerry, a 7-cost 4 attack 4 HP minion. Battlecry, if you've excavated twice, summon 6 3/3 Tram cards with Rush. This is very similar to Soulologist back in Dark Moon Fair. However, this is a much easier condition to fulfill nowadays, especially because it should allow you to just flood the board. The other thing worth mentioning about this card in particular is because there are a bunch of other Excavate cards within Warlock that we will be going over, such as Smokestack, a 1-cost fell spell that deals 1 damage to a minion. If it dies, excavate a treasure. Now, this card is not the best for Fell Warlock, however, it is incredibly strong for Excavate Warlock because we have also gotten the legendary treasure for Warlock revealed, which is the Azurite Snake, a 4-cost 5 attack 5 HP elemental beast that has the battle cry, your hero steals 10 HP from the enemy hero. Now, there are some fun and wacky combos that you can pull off with this. Because it says steal 10 HP from the enemy hero, I'm assuming this is probably going to hit through taunt, which means if you're going to use a 7-card combo of Thaddeus, Celestial Projector, Shallow Grave, the Brewmasters in order to bounce it back 4 times, you should be able to OTK any opponent as long as they're not Blood DK that are going to stack HP up by a bunch. Which honestly makes the Excavate package in Warlock incredibly strong, probably even stronger than the DK package that we have seen. And because we do have a card to easily trigger Shallow Grave on that does Excavate at the same time, such as this next card, Mogar Drillfist, a 4-cost 4 attack 5 HP mech demon with taunt, Death Rattle, Excavate a treasure. This is what I meant with Shallow Grave. If you use Shallow Grave on this and another copy of it, you will instantly Excavate for 4, which will instantly get you into the snake, thus allowing you to OTK. Sure, it is going to be a large card investment in order to pull off the entire combo, but honestly this combo is probably going to be not that inconsistent just because Warlock does have a lot of draw power and their hero power lets them draw. Alright, now time for Hunter. The first one is going to be Spurfang, a 5-cost 2 attack 5 HP beast. Battlecry, Death Rattle, summon a random beast with cost equal to this minion's attack. There are quite a few ways, even in standard, to buff up this card. Honestly, this was a style of deck that was massively improved with the Fall of Older War mini set, since we did get 2 additional ways to buff up minions within our hand. And in theory, this could be incredibly consistent on what you're actually going to be randomly generate, at least in standard. A 9 cost minion, at least beast wise, is probably a 1 in 3, if I remember right, of giving you King Crush, which is honestly incredibly strong. You're not always going to be able to get him up to 9 attack, but if you somehow do, you should be able to get consistent additional King Crushes, which could be incredibly strong. We also have things like Lothamar or the Hope of Coastal Loss in order to buff up this even further. Honestly, it's a really interesting package that hasn't really been explored too much in Hunter in quite a long time and could be a lot of fun to do so. Let's get on to the next card, which is going to be Saddle Up, a 3-cost spell that gives your minions Death Rattle, summon a random beast that costs 3 or less. It allows your minions to stick on the board in a aggro deck. This isn't really the worst thing in the world because a lot of the lower cost beasts should still have a pretty decent stat line. And now for the next snake, Silver Serpent, a 3-cost to attack 3 HP beast. Rush Poisonous, Quickdraw, gain immunity this turn. First off, it's a targeted removal for whatever minion your opponent might have on the board, as long as it doesn't have a taunt in between it and this minion, which is kind of cool. However, though I do think this is one of the weaker quick draw cards within the set, and because we do have Flint, I do think some of these quick draw cards did need to be a little bit worse than the other ones, just so it isn't the most consistent thing in the world and become a balancing problem itself. And now for the final snake, Sneaky Snake, a 1-cost spell that summons 2 1/1 snakes with stealth. Out of all the Hunter cards, even the previous one, I think this is probably the worst. Just because Hunter doesn't consistently have a way to buff up minions on the board, they have a lot of ways to buff up minions in your hand or deck. Board is a little bit harder to actually fulfill. I think there's just way better targets for you to try to use instead. All right, those were all the cards revealed for Druid, Hunter, and Warlock. Let me know down below what ones you're most looking forward to using and what you're expecting to see out of the remaining Hunter cards that have been delayed by a few days. Like always, if you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, bye bye.